One thing I wanted to ask you, and I get this asked a lot and stuff, like for people who really want to get into the developer space for crypto, what is your kind of go-to place for them? Like for people who want to make that career switch, as it's at the center of what you do, what's the first thing you would tell them? And are there any other kind of avenues or resources that people can turn to learn more about it?
Definitely, Nick. The one thing I would tell people, young people, people who want to aspire to get into the space, is to say, be on GitHub, live on GitHub. Social media is necessary to connect and to share, but if people want to be to play a role in building this future for tomorrow, it's going to happen at the level of code. And it doesn't mean that you have to write code, but it does mean that you have to understand code. And so I think people underestimate the need to be on GitHub to see firsthand, right, what's being built, how it's being built, right? That is a critical piece. Sometimes I think people forget, and it doesn't matter. Like I said again, you don't have to write code, but you should be able to understand the code.
Yeah, and what's nice too that I always try to explain this to people. It's not always the case, but usually, as you know, John, like with good code, usually comes good documentation, or at least usually you'll have kind of like non-active text in the code that explains what this functionality does or what it plays into. And I think that people get so overwhelmed when they go to somewhere like GitHub and they see all these different repos and like what is all of this? I can't make sense of it. But in reality, it's something that as you go through it and you start to learn how things are structured and how developers work on building things, you start to realize, okay, maybe I can't read the code, but at least I can understand and generally interpret what this component does and what broader feature does it service, what user stories does it meet, so that this protocol can deliver some kind of feature. And I think that's again like it's like with finance in general, where most people I meet get absolutely overwhelmed when they see a chart, when they hear about quantitative easing. When in reality, a lot of it's pretty practical concepts. It's just hidden by a lot of fancy language sometimes. I don't know if you have a similar sentiment on that.
Absolutely, Nick. Absolutely. No, you nailed it, man. In fact, I have a saying, we've used this often in the past is, it cannot be that complicated. If it is, something's wrong, right? It cannot be that complicated. And so I want to just tell people on your listeners, if somebody tells you it's too complicated for you, they're bullshitting you, right? It cannot be, right? And so you got to push back and say, no, if it's that complicated, forget about it, right? It's very simple. The fundamentals, the first principles are very simple. And this is why for me, as I build the developer toolkits, is to make it as simple as possible in about 3-4 minutes to be able to build your first smart contract. And if I cannot do it, something's wrong with the technology or my skill or the problem solving for you. So it's not that complicated, and don't let them bullshit you.
That should be the entry slogan in that case. That don't let them BS you. It's this simple.